the Seattle opening. How attractive is that, and who do you think they're going to target?
I believe it's a really attractive job opening in Seattle because they've gotten so much younger. They really flipped that thing over the last few years here. You look at the talent that they've amassed at the skill spots, the young talent that they've amassed on defense. Dan, they went into last season making moves like they thought they could win a Super Bowl right now. They brought back Bobby Wagner and paid him a bunch of money. They made a trade deadline trade for Leonard Williams, which gave up future draft picks. You don't do that if you're not expecting, hey, we're in it to win it right now. They end up 9-8. They missed the playoffs. I think it's fair to say they felt like this was a team that underachieved to a certain degree. 14 years is a long time for anybody to have one job in the NFL. Pete Carroll said it yesterday. He fought. As Pete always says, he competed to be the coach. But Jody Allen, the Seahawks chair, her mind was made up based on the total evaluation here. They're going to look, I think, it's an oversimplification to say, well, Dan Quinn's just going to come in. He's been there before. Dan Quinn's going to have other options. He's a real candidate in Tennessee. He's a real candidate in a place like Washington. He's got slips from a couple of other teams as well. Dan Quinn potentially is going to have options here once we get to the point that Dan Quinn can actually talk with other teams. And so for Seattle, I anticipate you're going to see them put in slips in all likelihood in the coming days here for some of the young offensive coaches, because with Pete Carroll, they've had good offenses at times through the years, but Pete's foundation is defense. Don't turn it over. We're going to win the way that we have to, and we have to cut you loose. Russell Wilson, Geno Smith in the fourth quarter. We're going to do that. I think it's going to be somebody who probably fits, in broad swaths, the culture that they've built here. Not that you're going to do everything the same as Pete, which is why it doesn't necessarily have to be Dan Quinn. But I think like that culture of positivity and competition is going to be a big deal for them. They'll run a broad search here, and I'll be interested to see where that lands.
But it feels like Pete still wants to coach. At 72, is he as attractive as Bill Belichick?
I think that if Pete Carroll wants to coach, and he said it in his press conference after the game as well as yesterday, that he doesn't feel worn out. He feels refreshed. He said he's freaking jacked. Again, to use another Pete Carrollism about what comes next here. Absolutely. I mean, there are teams that are going to evaluate this, and I can tell you are evaluating this with Pete. I mean, there's a couple of teams that would make sense. The Atlanta Falcons would make sense. I don't know that Pete is moving across the country to do that at this point, but there's always been an attraction for Arthur Blank to bringing in a guy like a Pete Carroll. I mean, he hired Dan Quinn years ago out of that same program. The Chargers are also a possibility if in terms of at least evaluating this opportunity. Can you imagine Pete Carroll going back to LA to take one more shot, and he's got Justin Herbert at quarterback and a veteran defense? Again, these are all hypotheticals at this point. The Chargers are a team that is going to interview a ton of people for this job. But I would absolutely not rule out Pete Carroll coaching in the NFL again, potentially even in 2024.